Chicago Bears GM Ryan Poles has let the cat out the bag a little bit in talking about what his methodology is going to be in approaching free agency. A free agency that's going to see the Chicago Bears have a league-leading $98 million in salary cap. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about some of the best prospects that come out of the Senior Bowl. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
All right, Bears fans, welcome to another episode of Chicago Bears Central. I'm one of the hosts here, Haize, holding it down on the daily episodes. And so Ryan Poles was interviewed, and he had a little bit to say in regards to kind of his thinking and his approach to free agency. And he said this: we've got to stay sound in free agency. I know everyone is talking about how much money we have, and we're just going to go crazy. We're going to be sound so we get the right players in here and we get good value and attack the draft, always keeping value in mind. That's not going to change just because we have the number one overall pick. So with this being said, it just kind of continues what we saw from Ryan Poles in his first offseason leading the Chicago Bears, in which he cleared a lot of the dead cap. He gave some prove-it deals away, but he didn't really spend a lot of big-time, long-term money on players just because the Bears had money. When you look at Byron Pringle, prove-it deal. You look at Larry Ogunjobi, that was a more sizable deal that the Chicago Bulls gave out, but that deal ended up not working out because of health concerns and reasons there. So when you really look at it, it's that Ryan Poles isn't going to spend money just to spend money. And I know for the large part of the offseason, one of the most fun things to speculate on is what free agents the Chicago Bears are going to end up with when it's all said and done heading into the 2023-24 season. But the Bears are going to spend the money with focus. They're not just going to spend money just to spend money. They're not just going to sign players just because they can or they can give out the largest deal. The Bears are going to attack this free agency being very focused and concerned and trying to add players that add value more than just going after the big names, big contract players, because those are going to be the splash signings. These are things that if you've been paying attention to this team, everybody knew it. Everybody's known it. Everybody's talked about it. I don't think anybody just thought that Ryan Poles is just going to be out here like Oprah. You get a deal and you get a deal and you get a deal. No, Ryan Poles is going to be very focused in how he goes about free agency. That's why you saw a deal like Roquan Smith, sending him away, instead of signing him to that massive contract. That's why going into the contract talks with David Montgomery, it's important to find a number that makes both sides happy. And I talked about in an episode last week on one of the dailies just how important that is for the Chicago Bears to find that right number that makes him, his agent, and the Chicago Bears happy without just breaking the bank. It's going to be a very, focused effort that the Bears use in their approach, in their attack to the NFL free agency. Now, one of those free agents that the Bears could be considered in, and I read some rumors that, and this is a signing that would go kind of in line with what we've seen from the Chicago Bears so far this season, and that is Paris Campbell, a player that played for the Indianapolis Colts last season. Not mind-blowing numbers, anything like that, but again, if the Bears do look to add to the wide receiver corps, it's either going to be some players in the draft, maybe some players like this, kind of similar to what they saw in Byron Pringle. This is Paris Campbell, 6 foot, 208 pounds. He played at Ohio State in college. He's played for the Indianapolis Colts, I should say. Last year, 63 receptions, 623 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's an average of 9.9 yards, good for the 100th most yards per catch in the NFL. And this is a guy who, looking at his stats, nothing's eye-popping crazy like that or anything, but there is enough to look at and say, maybe this is a player that the Bears do decide to take a flyer on and maybe take a look at. So, it sees he's coming back. He came back last season from an ACL injury, and so he's only had 32 games played over the course of his NFL career. So, you got to look at things like that and see what happens. But I'm looking at this and saying it's a player that I'm not necessarily that down on. So to say, 32 games played so far for him in his career, 97 total receptions. He's been targeted 144 times, and he's had 983 yards and 5 touchdowns on his career for the Indianapolis Colts. This is a player that is going into free agency. And we'll see. Again, really kind of gauging what level of free agents the Bears are going to be interested in is kind of difficult because we don't know what positions he's going to focus on in attacking in the offseason, what he's going to start focus on attacking at the draft. But really, when you look at it, we expect those trenches areas to be some of the focus of Ryan Poles on the defensive line and offensive line. We need to improve those two aspects of this team for various different reasons. I do think that, the Bears aren't going to be as focused as getting Justin Fields more weapons. I think they're going to be focused on getting him more protection so we can go through his progressions and use the weapons that they've already gotten him that are on this roster a little bit better before they go out and spend big time money on wide receivers, things like that. So that's kind of what I think of. That's my methodology between also looking at the Paris Campbell one, and we'll see what ends up happening for the Chicago Bears going into this offseason. It's going to be fun, but they're not going to spend money and give deals out just to give deals out. And so as free agency opens, I think we're going to see really early him go after his key free agents, the free agents that he has and knows he wants to bring into this roster. We're going to see those rumors and maybe those contract talks happen very early in the offseason, and then we can kind of have that settled. And then kind of in day 2, day 3 of the free agencies when we're going to fill in a little bit of those extra holes and then see what we do at the draft and then there's after the draft. So that's kind of what I think. But in talking about the draft, right, the Senior Bowl just went down, and there are a lot of prospects in the Senior Bowl that the Bears could take a look at. And we're going to talk about 10 of those prospects here. Now, the first one up is a offensive lineman, a center, in John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. This is a big guy, and we know what we need to do on that offensive line. And this is a guy who can come in. He was already said as he's probably the most consistent player in the NFL draft. He's great on one-on-one. He can pass and run block. This is a guy that you can draft, and he can be at the center for you for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and you don't have to worry about it. Next up is wide receiver Jaden Reed out of Michigan State. This is a guy who's probably going to be drafted day 2, day 3, so it's not a day 1 prospect, but he really showed a lot in the practice of the Senior Bowl. And it seems like there are some people who are already big fans of him on this team, and Reed has talked about him being a fan of Justin Fields. So again, he has the quickness, he has the explosiveness, he has really solid route running. He can create separation. Again, not anything amazing. That's why he's projected to go at day 2. But if the Bears do look to attack and address that wide receiver position, he's definitely one that the Bears could take a look at. Next one up is cornerback Julius Brents out of Kansas State. This is a guy who has the attitude. When you look at pairing him with Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon, you have your cornerback position probably locked up there for a while. He has the size at 6'4". He has great feet. He watches the cornerbacks, great eye discipline, it says here. And then also he makes wide receivers work for every single step. He's big, he's athletic. And then as the Bears defense looks to continue to evolve and be a disciplined defense, he's definitely somebody that the Chicago Bears could take a look at. Next up, offensive lineman Cody Mach. This is a lineman out of North Dakota. You can definitely look at him. We're looking at help across that whole offensive line. This is another prospect that's slated to go much later in the draft that the Bears could look as a depth piece. They could look at somebody to develop, especially if they go out and sign veterans on that offensive line. This is a guy that they could bring in, develop over that time, play a bench role, play a depth piece, and then be ready to take over some starting positions for the Bears as things go forward. Next up is Will McDonald. And so this is a guy that I talked about as well when I was covering the top 5, the top defensive line prospects not named Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. This is a guy who, again, even if they do end up drafting a Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, this is another day 2 piece, day 3 piece that they can look. He's slated to be a top 50 pick in most mock drafts, so the Bears could go after him and try to get him. But again, that's if they want to shore up that defensive line with young talent after going after one of those generational talents. But again, this is another guy who we'll see. Like, the Bears could trade down and still get him, maybe reach for him. This is a guy who can ball out and is going to be a very solid player at the NFL level. Next one, offensive tackle Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. This guy, we listen, right tackle is a position that we can use. He can be a great fit on this team. He had a great week of practice. Luke Getsy's already gotten to take a look at him. He's a day 1 starter. Most mocks have him, so he can come in and start for you right away. 6'6", 335 pounds. This is a weapon. This is a monster, and I would love to have him on the line for the Chicago Bulls. Next one up is a defensive tackle, Abadore, out of Northwestern. This is a guy who is a 3 technique, which the Bears do need. It's also why Jalen Carter's being linked to the Chicago Bears as well. But if we do trade back from that number 1 pick and fall out of that top 4 or 5 and Jalen Carter isn't there, he's absolutely somebody that we can look at. So he's projected to be an interior defensive lineman in a 4-3 defense. He likes the idea of the 3 tech role. another player that the Bears definitely should and probably will be taking a look at. Michael Wilson out of Stanford. This is a guy that Bobby actually pulled up on our live last night. I think he's the one that called him up. 6'10", 216 pounds. This is a guy who can just get it done. He missed a lot of time in college. He can be a mid-round steal because while, he's had some injury concerns, if you end up getting him and he works out for you and hits, this is a guy where you can get value from down in the draft and could end up becoming a big piece and weapon for the Chicago Bears. And I talked about it a little bit yesterday, as well as the potential of getting some players in here who can be non-positional players, right? You think of Cordell Patterson, you think of Deebo Samuel, very different ways they go about it. But Michael Wilson is definitely one of those guys who could potentially be that. Now, number 9, we got Payne Durham out of Purdue. This is another guy who, again, not a position that may be a high focus for the Chicago Bears. And that is why, considering he's going to go in the later part of the draft, you can definitely take a look at him. He's a player that you could bring up and can possibly develop in that system. Again, you'd want to still have another veteran probably there at tight end position, but you can develop him in your team, in your organization, and he can be a piece that you use with a cold commit, or even when a cold commit has to sit, be a depth piece for the Chicago Bears. Last one up, and the one that I'm most excited about, that is the running back Tyjae Spears out of Tulane. This is a guy, I'm telling you what, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, if David Montgomery leaves, this is a guy the Bears should take a look at. No, I'm saying regardless, if he's there, second round, third round, you take him and you worry about it after the fact and let it figure it out. This guy can just ball. This guy can ball. 190 pounds, 5'10". He's a junior. He rushed for 1,581 yards and 19 touchdowns. This guy can just flat out ball. And one of the reasons he bounced back from an ACL injury, that's part of the reason he's expected to go a little bit lower in that draft potentially. So this is a guy that if he is there in the later rounds for the Chicago Bears, you take him and you figure out the rest later. He's quick. He has the speed. He has agility. He's competitive. He has great instincts. He holds onto the ball. Great vision. Those are the things that you need. He could also add some depth to special teams. This is a guy that I'm super excited about. And if he's there in the later rounds for the Chicago Bears, do not be surprised if you hear Tyjae Spears' name called and he becomes a member of the Chicago Bears. But that's it for today's daily episode. Let me know any prospects in the Senior Bowl that stood out to you. Make sure you follow the show at Chi Bear Central. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. ChicagoBearsCentral@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text and a voicemail for our Friday mailbag episodes, the number to do so, 773-242-9336. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related. Like I liked in everything on Bear Down. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.